awarded a Diplomate of Acupuncture after passing her board exam from the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. She is licensed to practice acupuncture in the state of Colorado. She keeps that licensure current. Oh, I'm like, I hear myself. Okay. She keeps that licensure current, even though she does not professionally practice in that state, as a hallmark of legitimacy, since South Dakota does not have state regulations for acupuncturists, and she will actually share a little more about that. She maintains medical malpractice insurance as well as business liability. She considers herself a general practitioner with areas of intense interest and extra training. One of her great joys of her practice is helping women conceive and carry their babies to full term. She also has strong empathy for addicts of all kinds and works to help those that want to free themselves from addiction with various acupuncture techniques. Colleen believes that Oriental medicine is beneficial for a great many ailments and to help people achieve a state of wellness. There are 5 aspects that comprise Oriental medicines: acupuncture, herbal prescriptions, physical movement and activity, meditation and other practices to calm and center our emotional hearts, and diet and nutrition advice based on traditional Chinese principles. She maintains her national certification through continuing education classes and is currently active with a bill intended to regulate the practice of acupuncture that will move forward in the 2020 legislative session. Colleen is also the president of the South Dakota Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine Association. With that, I am honored to introduce my friend Colleen Ragan.
Hi, good morning. About 6 months ago, I started writing creatively. For years, people have been telling me, you should write a book because your life is so interesting. And so I immediately would break out into a sweat. The thought of a book was overwhelming. But I did start writing short stories. And I tell you this because I trust my writing more than I trust my memory. My memory jumps around. And so I've got notes. I may be the most low-tech person you've ever run into. I have been in practice for 13 years. And in January, I started receiving Social Security. So that's kind of I'm not young anymore, but that's okay. I like where I'm at right now. It's been a pretty wild ride, and I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest on it. I grew up in New Jersey, and as a kid, reading was my first escape from the mundane and boring. My next escape that I discovered was the theater. There was a program in our town for children's summer theater, and I got a job. It was the first money I actually remembered making, and what I did at this job was herd kids around, get them on and off the stage in the right place, help with makeup and costuming, and I got to perform. I was on stage, and I loved it. I'm singing, I'm dancing, it was great. That process of community theater for children was a labor of love by teachers and other adults who wanted to perform, who wanted to make it big in New York City, and I became one of them, not as an adult, as a child, as a teenager. I thought, this is my calling, I want to do this. So I go to my first New York City cattle call audition, which means everybody cattle call, that's kind of what you're treated like. So you go in, I was dressed ridiculously, and I thought I was fabulous, and I sang my song, and I was delivering it, and I cracked on the high note. And that was the end of my love affair with professional theater. What I realized in that moment was that unless I could handle rejection a lot for everything, this was not my career. It doesn't matter how much I loved it. There were at least 30,000 more of me and my type and what I could do there. So I was like, okay, no pro theater for me, no big pro showbiz, moving on. And I moved on to factory work because there's a lot of factories in New Jersey. It was hideous. I hated it. I was not suited for it. It was horrible. And so what else is a Jersey girl to do? I took up waitressing. I was pretty good at being subservient in that environment. It was okay. And I did that for a bunch of years. Eventually, I left New Jersey and I moved to Florida, which is another thing that people from New Jersey do. And I moved to Florida, and then eventually, not very much longer after that, I actually began the next big phase of my life, which involved cross-country hitchhiking a few times alone. They were wild times. I lived in a commune, for real, in a teepee in the woods in Oregon, where I learned how to survive in the winter after living in Florida. It was very cold, but I learned a lot. And I also lived on the bus on the West Coast. It was kind of fun. It was actually a lot of fun. And I did that for a few years, of what I remember of it. It was a lot of fun. But I met two people from Wyoming there, and they were Arapaho Indian people from the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. And so I got an invitation. In fact, we all did. And I was the one that went to Wyoming. And that began a 45-year plus relationship with Native people in Wyoming. And that morphed into wherever I went, there were Native people that I was able to connect with because of that initial connection and because I was accepted. And it was a good fit. So I was happy with that. So I'm on the res. I'm working at Woolworths. I'm waiting the lunch counter. It was again rather hideous, but it was okay. You know, I was making money, and then I discovered community college, where I could go to school and make more money than I was waiting tables. So that was a no-brainer. That's what I did. I studied art, music, dance, the basic stuff you have to take at community college. And then I discovered broadcast communications. I discovered radio because I had made what some people considered a controversial art piece, and it actually did stir some controversy, and that's a story for another day. But when they took my piece out of public display, the radio station came to ask me what I thought about it, and I was like, what? And so that's how I discovered radio. I got into radio. I discovered the power of media. I discovered I liked being on the radio. I liked playing music, and I liked running my mouth, and I was pretty good at it. So that was. It took me a long time to get out of community college in Wyoming. I was having a very good time, and then I came here to go to school at Black Hills State College, which is what they called it way back then. And I did a couple of semesters, and I studied broadcasting, and that's where I met Jack, and we did radio together. Jack and I used to lock horns regularly. I was so disruptive. And so I was doing radio, and I was doing Native Studies. And then I came to Rapid City one day for a rally of some kind, and I discovered that there were a bunch of environmentalists working here, and that there was a very serious environmental issue going on in the hills at that time. And so I quit school because this was way less mundane and boring. And I went to work for a few years doing environmental work and developed a much deeper love of the idea of protecting our planet, thinking ahead for what are we leaving, what's our legacy for the kids, what's our legacy for the grandkids. It became a passion for me, and it remains a passion, my love affair with Mother Earth. So that lasted for a few years, and I go back to the res, and I marry a man, and you know that was a disaster. But it was a loving relationship, and I did learn a lot from being married. I also learned a lot from being divorced. I did radio in Wyoming, Montana, New Mexico. I did television in Wyoming and Los Angeles. There's the lead. So during the divorce, I moved to Los Angeles, where my sister lived. She was pursuing an acting career. So she paved the way, and it was easy for me to get in. I worked temp jobs at her suggestion, temporary assignments, and I said, I only want to work in showbiz, in entertainment. I think I was a little more formal than showbiz. But I said I wanted to work in entertainment. So I got to work all around LA in a bunch of different entertainment-based places. So I learned a lot about where I didn't want to work and where the cool studios were that I could work. Out of that, I found a temp job at KNBC television when the unions went on strike there. And so the non-union workers went and filled union jobs, and I got a temporary job answering phones in the newsroom. And from that experience, I was able to segue into a full-time job at another television station in Los Angeles, where I was the administrative assistant to the first female news director in a major market news station. So that was really interesting, and our management styles were very different. She was tough, and I was like, oh, honey, come on, you know you want to do this for me, do this little job. And so we had some clashes along the way, and it was getting close to, maybe I don't want to work here anymore. And then Disney bought our company, and they bought the whole company. So we went from a staff of 60 to a staff of 150 over the course of 6 months. We went from 3.5 hours of news a day to 3.5 hours of news a day. And I managed to live through that corporate takeover. I actually survived several corporate takeovers. I did get fired in a few. Well, a lot of people got fired in a few of those corporate takeovers. That's part of what happened. So when I was in television, I was able to learn how to do things that I didn't get in college because our TV setup wasn't there. I learned how to produce public service announcements. I took news writing classes. I learned how to write news stories, and my stuff got on the air. And then one day, but serendipitously, a story for another day, the production manager of the television station discovered that I had a radio voice and that I could do announcements. And so she said, you need to join the union, and then when Mr. Voice isn't here, the big guy, you can fill in because you're on campus, you're on site. So I did that. I joined the union for $800. I made it back in the first month I was there. And I was working as much overtime as I could possibly want there. It was so busy. And I made so much money in LA. It was great. It's really helped my Social Security. It was great. It really did. It was, and I learned a lot. And I had much like New York, a love-hate relationship with Los Angeles as well. And I was there to a point where things really started changing. And my PTSD gut reactions to life was ratcheted up because of a series of drive-by shootings got started in those years. Earthquakes, mudslides, fire, lots of fires, riots, riot changed my life. The reaction to the Rodney King sentencing changed my life. And I still get, our neighborhoods were on fire. The smoke was rolling in the studio. The gunshots were getting closer. This was not a movie. Jeez, it scared the crap out of me. And it made me say, I don't want to be any place I can't walk out of again. I can't be here. So it took me a year to wrap up my life there. And I had my fingers in a lot of pies. I was involved in the Native acting community there, so I know a lot of people in front of the camera and behind the camera in the Native community. And the non-Native community. I actually got to work on movies here. Oh, I was in a few too, but again, a conversation for another day. I came back to South Dakota because I had people here. I had a community here, people who knew me. There was radio, there was martial arts, and I figured, I'm big time now. I was in a union. They did not pay the same. And so I got a bunch of part-time jobs, which led to an eventual full-time job in radio, and I did that for 9 years. And it took 9 years for me to really get to boredom and disdain for my job. I really hated my career. I needed something else. I was looking for a new challenge. So back in LA, I had received acupuncture from an amazing practitioner, and insurance covered it. It was great. So, it was a very, minimal cost to go because insurance covered it for a certain amount of visits. And it made me a believer. After one treatment, I felt better. After following his course of protocols, which was about 5 treatments over the next 2.5 weeks, I felt like my spine went from a lightning bolt to straight. I felt taller. I felt healthier. I felt more clear. So I bought in. It was fascinating. I didn't understand how it worked. And why did you ask me all those questions about all these things that have nothing to do with my back? So it was a curiosity. So that interest and that passion and that fascination just grew and grew and grew. And so then I took some classes at the community, at the tech school, not to be confused with School of Mines, Western Dakota Tech. I took classes at night to see if I could think like a student, because I actually never applied myself in school. Who needed to do that? And I really didn't study. The only thing I actually studied for was more like cramming when I passed the licensure for broadcasting, which we needed back in the day. You don't need that anymore. So I took 5 different classes, medically related classes, to see if I could think like a student. And then I said, that's it, I'm all in. I applied, I got accepted, I got financial aid, and so I went off to Boulder, Colorado, and I spent 4 years studying traditional Chinese medicine. There was no time off. I studied. I did everything they said. I read everything. I had to read everything a few times because I was a little slower than most. I was older than most of my teachers at school, which worked to my advantage a lot of times. And I worked really hard, and I loved it. It was great. I was getting treatments all the time. I was learning a lot. And so I got a degree after 4 years. I took my board exams. I passed them. I was ready for the world. So I was negotiating with an acupuncturist to open a clinic in, I think it was northern Wyoming. And we had a deal going. I thought we had a deal going. When it came time to close the deal was very different than what he said. He remembered saying, way different than what I remembered him saying. And so that didn't work out. And that kind of really made me believe that not everybody's true to their word. And it was discouraging, even though I'd been through all these corporate takeovers and I'd seen, people lying all the time. But this was personal. And so I didn't know what to do then. I've got a boatload of debt, and I didn't know what to do. So I came back to Rapid for the third time. And I knew people here, and I figured I know hundreds of people in this community, having been a radio personality. Of course, I used my real name, not my radio name. But, I figured people knew me. I'd be wildly busy. And I was pretty busy. I opened my doors in May of 2007, and I was busy. And then in 2008, we had a recession, and I was not so busy. It was difficult. I immediately got a part-time job. I worked overnights at an elder care facility because I did that when I was in school to help supplement my education, with the money that it actually takes to live while you're going to school. And so I worked Friday and Saturday night overnights, and I did acupuncture all week long. So I was working a lot. Those were long hours, and that's okay because I kept going. The economy got better. I quit my part-time job. I'm working at acupuncture. We took another recessionary hit. I got another part-time job, and then when it lifted a bit and times got a little better, I pulled out all the stops. I did everything I could to remain in acupuncture. An acupuncturist, self-employed, but I also started. I worked in a massage therapy studio for a couple days a week in Deadwood for quite a long time. I worked for a couple of different chiropractors in the area. I worked with one and for one. I did home visits. I did community organizations. I did trade shows. I did everything I could to promote myself, and I made it, and I kept doing it. And I've been doing it for a long time, and I loved it. I moved offices a couple of times within my building, and then I moved to where I'm at now, and I was doing really good. I did pick up another job at the radio station just to supplement because they kind of made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It was kind of the Godfather offer, and so they said, okay, you want to do a morning show? Something I'd never done. It was a challenge. The technology had changed vastly, and so I was able to learn that while I was working there. And they said, you can do whatever you want. Dream job. So I did that, and so I was on the air live and streaming, and people could hear me all over, and it was really great. And I did radio for 4 hours in the morning, and then I did acupuncture. So I was working 60 hours a week, and I was jamming. I was doing it. I was fine. And then in September of 2017, I had a major health crisis, and I was down, I was out, I was hospitalized, and I was out of work for 4.5 months. Everything was different. And what I had to look at was the aspect of what can I do? Because I knew what I couldn't do. I couldn't work 60 hours a week anymore, so the first thing to go was the radio job. And the next thing to go was downsizing from 2 treatment rooms to 1 and revamping my workspace so that I could still work well, but not so intensely busy. And it was okay. I was happy that I got to quit radio on a high note. It was closure for me. It was full circle. I don't hate radio anymore. I actually really like it. I don't want to work there anymore, but I really like it. I love what I do. I love helping people to their best health. I love that there is actually a medicine that is incongruous as it sounds, letting a stranger poke sharp things in you to make you feel better. It actually works. And I've seen it work over and over again. I've seen it work on skeptics, and of course, it doesn't work on everyone. Nothing works on everyone all the time. It doesn't matter what medicine you're doing, what diet you're following, it doesn't matter. Nothing works for everyone 100% all the time. So you just got to make peace with that. So I do the best I can, and I release the results, and I hope for the best. And that's what I tell people. I don't make any promises other than I will do my very best for you. And I won't blab your story out in public because we have ethics. And I will answer your calls when you need my advice, and I will do the best I can. So I love it. So I love going to school too. So I have to take continuing education, 60 hours every 4 years. I've re-credentialed, I think, just for the 3rd time. So I just got back from a class that I took in Boulder last week, and I'm all fired up again about this new aspect of treatment that I can do to do even more good. that thrills me to be able to do more good. So bringing up the bill, the acupuncture bill. I'm an East Coast girl. Sorry if I'm talking too fast. Our bill would be to regulate the practice of acupuncture in South Dakota. We are one of the last 3 states in the country that does not have a Practice Act. And what the Practice Act would do, ideally, is actually make sure that we're doing the right job. If you have an issue with me as a professional acupuncture, you have no place to tell anybody. Nobody's in charge of us. So that needs to change, and it also needs to change to protect the integrity of the medicine. We've had some bad actors here. We have people who, another story for another day, people who are bad actors and who could give people a bad name, and also risky treatments. You actually can hurt people with acupuncture. You actually can. They teach us in school not to do that, and how not to do that. And I've gotten pretty good at not hurting people, and especially in a meaningful and deep way. So we need to protect our clients. We need to protect the integrity of the medicine, and that's kind of exciting. We did file. I'm sorry, I'm going long. We did go for regulation 10 years ago. Our primary sponsor was our governor. Now, so I'm hoping we've already written to her and say, hey, honey, we're doing this again. I didn't say, hey, honey, to Miss Christie. But we found a primary sponsor recently. That was really great. It was somebody who's been a 20-year friend of mine who is a new legislator and said she would sponsor the bill. I didn't even ask her. So that was really great. So what I'm thrilled about with my life is that at the end of the day, I get to do what I want, as much as I want. I've got something I can do until I either don't want to do it anymore or I physically can't. And that's what I was looking for when I wanted to get out of media. Radio and television, not an overly kind media to old girls. They're kinder to old guys. But it doesn't matter. Acupuncture has proven really, really helpful for 2 passions in my life. And one is to deal with people who are breaking free of addictions. There's actually science and studies that say acupuncture helps people get off opioids. And that's a passion for me. I've got nearly 21 years in recovery, clean and sober, and it matters to me to help people who want out of that lifestyle, who want out of that oppression. And I love working with veterans. And the VA is paying for veterans to come in and be treated for pain because it works. They don't throw money away. Well, they might throw money away sometimes, but they don't throw money away on stuff that doesn't really work. So I work with veterans who need help, and I love that. And that's a passion for me as well. I get to help people through pain of all kinds and toward wellness and to mind, body, and spirit healing. It is a glorious responsibility. I love it. I love it. So the most common question I get is, does acupuncture hurt? To which I almost always answer, almost never, because that's true. You might feel a little, ooh, I noticed that, or you might feel a dull ache, or you might feel a heaviness. But if you feel something, ow, ow, get it out, I quickly take it out. It almost never happens that way. It's geared to be safe, effective, and gentle, which is my little catchphrase, because that's how I work. So it does a whole lot more than just pain relief. And maybe you've never had acupuncture. Maybe you never knew anybody who practiced traditional Chinese medicine. Now you do. Thanks.
And yeah, please state your name and your organization when you ask your question too.
That we're with Isogenics and also with Freedom Acupuncture. Colleen, it's pretty easy to figure out why you have a passion to help people that have addictions, because you said you were free of them yourself. But you also have this passion for veterans, and you're able to put in words for that.
The veterans have given so much, and the rate of suicides is appalling, is actually terrifying. And the pain that people who have lived through war scenarios, whether it's physical pain, which it often is, or emotional pain, which it almost always is staggering for someone to handle alone. And what we found through that a lot of times talk therapy isn't as helpful as we would hope. Because a lot of times with talk therapy, especially this, and this is from the vets that I talk to, they have to tell their story over and over and over again. And so with a PTSD scenario, all that emotion comes up again. I don't really need to hear your story. I can feel your pulses. I can look at your face. I can hear what you're not saying. You know, one of the things that I got from being in broadcasting was how to be a good interviewer. And so, and then that skill was honed in school. But the veterans need help, and I want to give it to them as much as I can. So, I endure the unbelievable mountains of paperwork that is generated. And she's laughing, she knows. And you know, the transitions through who's going to administer that process. I endure it because I love the vets and I owe it to them, and it's something I can do. That's that.
To piggyback on that, do you think like just one session is helpful, or does it need to be multiple?
One session as helpful?
Yeah.
That's a good question. You know, they had a little story they told us in school about master acupuncturists, and that the best acupuncturist could put in one needle and you're healed. But it was pretty hard to ask for $65 for that. So, so I would love to be that master practitioner, and I actually have become much more minimal in how many points I need to activate. But one treatment, I have seen some pretty remarkable things, but I actually regard the one treatment cure as the exception, not the rule. And I worked on a guy one time who had some foot thing going on for years, and he came in and he says, I've got this foot thing going on, it's like medical speak, and can you fix it? And so I did the best I could, and and I say, you know, come back in like, you know, 2 weeks at the most. And so he comes back, he's got his phlebotomist girlfriend with him, and she wants to know how that worked. And I said, you know, it might have just been the right time, the right place. Perhaps he did something different. And no, it doesn't always work like that. I wish it did. Usually it's a series of treatment. And I also tell people, if we were in China, time and money was not an issue. The usual course of treatment is 8 to 12 visits. For me, I tell people, give it a try 4 times. If you're not getting anywhere and you're still interested in acupuncture, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not doing the treatment. Let me refer you to somebody else before you give up on the medicine. So that's where I stand with people, and that's worked pretty well. I have a pretty good client base that comes back from the very. I have people from the very beginning. I have people who don't even need acupuncture anymore. They just like it. They come. One gal comes in twice a month, makes her feel better. Who am I to say, don't come in? I'm happy to help people feel better, and wellness is really where it's at. It's not just fixing your disease. That's a construct that I think we need to move past. Yes, of course I want to make your back feel better, your migraine headaches go away, your gastrointestinal problems get better. But what can we do together to help you to the best wellness possible? And sometimes there's homework for people who actually are willing to do homework. Is that helpful? Great, thank you. Thanks for the question. Go ahead.
Colleen Ragan with Edward Jones. Can you give a layman's description of how the medicine actually works?
Yes. And I'm going to break it down as simply as I possibly could. If we start with the idea that we actually are comprised of water and basically electrical synaptic responses in our body, something the brain is triggering involuntary and voluntary movement. So we've got action going on. I'm going to call that action qi, or energy. In Chinese medicine, we call the energy that moves through us qi. What happens with an ailment like a low back pain is the qi is blocked somewhere. Often it's musculoskeletal. You've got compressed vertebrae. You landed on your tailbone one time. You never dealt with it. You broke a bone somewhere. You're getting old, and so we look to release where the qi is blocked so that it can nourish completely the rest of the body. The job of qi, or energy, is to nourish the muscles. If the muscles are nourished, the tendons are softened and more cooperative. If those two factors are handled, then everything else starts feeling better. If we've got freedom of energy moving through our body, we're able to think more clearly. Our sleep gets better. And so that's the quick Western explanation of a very complex Chinese medical philosophy. I could tell you it's based on yin and yang, which it is. The tide goes out, the tide comes in, the sun comes up, the sun comes down. One becomes the other. That's the basis of yin and yang. There are 12 meridians or channels in your body. Each is connected to the next. It is not compartmentalized medicine. Everything is connected. So I could go on and on. I could give classes, but that's like really the most basic aspect of it. Acupuncture therapy and treatment and techniques are also, and herbal medicine especially, is also based in observing nature. So the analogy of the tide goes out, the tide comes in is valid because you don't have one without the other. There is no pure black and white. Things are always changing. We are always changing. We are capable of changing. Depends on how willing we are. And I have people who define themselves by their dis-ease. So if that's how you define yourself, we're going to have a harder time moving forward. So with those people, we're looking at ways to stimulate creative thinking and alternatives. Sometimes if you've got gut problems, well, how much milk do you take in? Maybe you've got a sensitivity. How much white bread do you eat? Oh boy, do people like bread. And a lot of people have a sensitivity at least. What we realize is that sugar causes inflammation. Darn my love affair with sugar. There are things that I've had to do or that I get to do. I'm really working on languaging and changing how I present things. Instead of what I don't have, or what you don't have, what can we do? What's an answer you can live with? Maybe you can only make one small change. Maybe you can only drink one more glass of water this week. That's good enough. Do that. Do that. So, go ahead.
Colleen, I'm Leah with Nsight Partners. Who, besides other acupuncture clinics, who's your competition?
My competition and my colleagues and allies, Kate Halstead has Acupuncture for Health. Thrive is a husband and wife team. They're on Mount Rushmore Road, behind the pizza joint there, and they have a really good clinic. Drea Miller has Big Sun Acupuncture up on West Main across from Boyd's. Let me think, is there anybody else in Rapid? Oh, there's two new gals who just moved into town from Chicago who I just met with the other day. And they are really esoteric. They're way out there. They're great girls. They do acupuncture, but they do a lot of other things too. So that's the competition colleagues in this town. There are two acupuncturists in Spearfish, and rumor has it there's a traditional Chinese medicine trained practitioner in Blackhawk. I haven't found him yet. And then there's the chiropractic acupuncturists who are self-regulated and have to take 300 hours of acupuncture training. And it's an adjunct therapy. I know really good chiropractic acupuncturists, and I know others. Then there are the physical therapies who were just regulated, who do what people are wondering about now, which is dry needling. So people say, Colleen, what's dry needling? It's like dry needling is acupuncture. We learn it. We call it trigger point release. It has a very deep and serious training, but I don't know that everybody's taking that training. I know an acupuncturist who did, and it was a lot of science, and it was actually in another country, and it's orthopedic, deep needling directly into the trigger point, and some people find that painful. I've done it on request. I can do it, but I don't just jump in there and say, hey, unless somebody wants that particular treatment, because honestly, it hurts, and it also has the potential of being dangerous if you're not doing it right, if you're not really well trained. So if you're going into lymph under here, or you're going deeply up here, you could pierce a lung. You could pierce a lung. The apex of the lung is right up on top. It is also the most common malpractice lawsuit, and rarely brought against TCM-trained acupuncturists, brought against others. So, on a very thin person working on their back, you don't go straight in to nourish you don't go straight in to nourish the organ systems in the back. You go in on an angle so that you avoid them. Even on a big person, you do that because you don't know. If someone takes a deep breath, you could do damage. So it's not like, I'm not doing nails here. I have to be real, and which not to disparage anyone who does nails because I would like to get my nails done, but it's a complex medicine, and that's another reason why it needs to be regulated. We can't have people who are potentially dangerous. There's no threat of anybody who already has licensure, but there have been people here who, say, one guy. Yeah, I learned acupuncture in China. So if somebody says that, it's like, wow, who did you study with? What's your lineage? And then when someone says, well, I did this, oh, let's try this. And they're not actually telling you where they went. And he advertised that he did electrostimulus acupuncture. I don't know that he knows you do not cross the body with electricity because it can hurt people. You have to be super conscious with electricity with people with pacemakers. Yes, ma'am.
So that kind of ties into how do you choose an acupuncturist? If you're interested in that particular form of medicine for migraines or whatever, how do you choose which person's right for you?
In the simplest way, you interview them, you vet them, you look at their credentials. So you might be able to just do it through Google, but if you really want to know who's trained, who went to school, who is licensed, who's up on continuing ed, who isn't facing ethics or criminal charges, you go on our certification website and you go find an acupuncturist. And then it takes you, and then you put in your city or state, and then it takes you to the people who are trained the way I am. And then you start calling people. You see who you resonate with. Look at their web pages. If somebody sounds shady, or you just start making phone calls and say, "Where'd you go to school? Do you have malpractice insurance? Where are you located? How long have you been in business? Why are you doing what you do? Does it hurt?" And you interview people and you vet them. But the safest way that I tell people, and when people say I'm moving to another area, I'll find the people for them and give them a copy of what's printed on our website. And it's NCCAOM. And yeah, a lot of letters. But that's how you do it. Go ahead.
Mike Dupre, Rocky Talks. You talked about in 2007 starting your practice, then in 2008 things slowing down.
Yes.
Was there ever a point where you were concerned that you were going to have to go back to radio or go back to a straight job, that this wasn't going to pan out?
Yes. But I quickly banished that from my thoughts because I was still in that place where I couldn't stand radio. I couldn't stand it. It was changing a lot. It was becoming much more corporatized, and I don't want to be. It's not really challenging to be entertaining in 30 seconds or less. It's not really challenging to find cool things to talk about. You don't really get much of a choice in what you play. And the most challenging, the most creative aspect of radio until I got the morning show job was commercials, which I'm still on the air. People are like, "Oh, I heard you on the radio." It's like, did I try and sell you something? Because my commercials are still on the air 2 years later. They're evergreen in some places. But yeah, I thought a lot about it, and I did everything I could to not have to. And then when I couldn't do that overnight, helping elderly people anymore because my body was starting to quit on me and I wasn't paying attention to it, I went back to radio because it was helpful. It was a guaranteed income no matter what. And I had loans to pay back. And so the first year I was able to pay back $5,000 to the guy who lent me $5,000. And then through the years I've been able to pay back quite a bit of money to my sister. My dad lent me money. And then when I tried to pay him back, he wouldn't take it. So I was like, "Thanks, Dad," and he supported my business. And when I needed help, I brought people in. I've wished that I was making enough money to have an assistant, and I do. I just don't have enough money to pay the government. It's part of it. So I just do it myself, and so I'm a one-man band, and it's been great. I'm the boss, and if I don't do it, it doesn't get done. So when I'm taking training or taking days off or I'm sick, like that 4.5 months, if it wasn't for as Blanche Dubois said, the kindness of strangers, I would have gone under. I almost did. People did GoFundMe pages. They did the radio station did a fundraiser for me. People dropped off piles of money. People dropped off food. People cleaned my house. People helped me move things around. That's my community. So yeah, I thought about it and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want it. I want to move forward. I want to be excited about my life until the day I leave it. And I am. But if it falls through, I'm getting a part-time job. I don't care. I am not above doing honest work anywhere.
Antoinette Braun, Army Source. Piggybacking on that, so what are you doing now business-wise to ensure you don't end up there?
Well, all right, so the money pundits are saying that 2021 doesn't look pretty. And then their opposition is saying it's going to be okay. So what I am doing is I do advertising, but I don't do a lot of it. Because being in the media, I know that if advertising works, all advertising works, if you know who your target audience is, and if you're marketing to that target. My target audience, more than anything else, is my existing client base and their referrals. And that's what I've realized, that the most effective marketing, especially for me, is word of mouth. So, being on Social Security has really taken the pressure off. So I am doing fine. Will I continue doing fine? I certainly hope so. I do email. I do letters. I write letters. I throw specials. I send postcards. I'm getting ready to revamp my website because I really want to focus more on the idea of wellness than illness. And so I want to do that. And I talk to people all the time. I give free treatments. People want to say, oh, what is acupuncture? What does it look like? I don't have needles with me now, but at public events, I'll whip one out and go, clean an area, boom, that's what it looks like. Want to try it? And then some people will say yes. So really, I make phone calls. I check in with people. And when I'm not busy with people, I'm busy with mountains of paperwork. So I keep myself pretty busy all the time. Like today I only have 3 people. I'm working Saturday because I can see 2 people then, and why not? I've worked Sundays. I don't like working nights, but occasionally I will, especially if it's an established patient. I do what I need to keep going. And I do it, with a happy heart. If that is an answer for you. Oh, I did do a run of advertising recently because I came into money that was another story, and I needed to burn some money up, and so I did a bunch of advertising. And so I'm here. Oh, I saw you in such and such a magazine. So the thing is to help people remember that I'm still here. I did interviews. I was on KOTA the other day during Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine Day last week, and they broadcast like an hour of their show live. And so I got to talk about acupuncture, and my vice president, Drea, got to talk about legislation. And so that was pretty cool. Anything else?
I have a question for you, please.
Yes, ma'am.
What are some of your specialties in acupuncture or ailments that you're very passionate about?
Well, I'm super passionate about fertility because there's so many women who really want babies. And so it's actually a double-edged sword because when you help someone conceive, whether it's, I don't want to do in vitro fertilization, I don't want to do these chemical methods, I want to do it naturally. So then there's a lot of work involved. And even with working with IVF docs, there's a lot of work that the client gets to do. Like, and in Chinese medicine, if you're trying to conceive, one of the things that is suggested is that you give up coffee and sugar, and you start adding more fish in your diet, and ginger, and lots more water, and you do these things, and if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. And if you're spending $10,000 on IVF treatments, you are probably going to do everything. So I've had some really great success. I've helped some babies come in the world, and it makes me happy when I see them, in the stores, being pushed around in carts or disrupting the aisles. It makes me really happy to see these children, and people have thanked me for that. The other side of that is I get to help people when it doesn't work. Because sometimes nothing works. Or sometimes you were able to have that baby with IVF, and now it's not going to work anymore. How do we make peace with that? So that's where a lot of that emotional balancing, that's a passion for me. I love that. I love that, but it's tough work. It's tough work, and it costs a lot of money, honestly. Then of course the veterans and the addiction thing. The addiction thing, I have been to too many funerals. You know, being in recovery as long as I have seen a lot of people die from overdoses of all kinds. And I would like to see that stop. I would like to see people not feel like I can't live without fill in the blank. Like, you know, let's find the joy in your life again. Let's let this go. So I'm super passionate about that. Kids are a lot of fun. You know, they don't usually, kids under 7 don't get acupuncture. In China they do, but they don't here. They get acupressure, and there's a little toolkit you use. So instead of, and sometimes people with like fibromyalgia who are too tender to actually accept a needle into their body, I can barely palpate them. I can do other things. There's a lot more than just sticking needles in you. So, does that help?
One last question.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever done pets, animals?
I actually have. And so when you look at skeletons, or plastic skeletons, they a lot of times if you've got on your hands and knees, the body looks a lot like the human body, but I'm not really secure with it, and I'm not trained in it, and so if I were in Colorado, despite my license in Colorado, I would not be licensed to treat pets with acupuncture. So occasionally I'll do it for friends. And but it's nothing that I say, yeah, sign me up. I don't want to hurt anybody. And animals can't really tell. The opposite side of that is if you do it well, you can tell the animal's happy. They feel better immediately because they don't have words. They're just like, oh, a little puddle of happiness. So. Well, I'm going to make it twofold. So if you think that now you've met a relatively trustworthy person who you might actually send your mother to, refer me, please. But bigger than that for me at this time is the legislation. And I think it's going to pass. But at some point, I'm going to come in and say, here's either something that you can send to your representatives supporting the need for House bill, Senate bill, whatever the number's going to be. And you can call and you can email. And if you can help us regulate and bring South Dakota into the rest of the nation, please don't let me be the last state to regulate acupuncture. It's going to happen. But we need to move forward. Just because nothing has been reported to the medical board doesn't mean things haven't happened. And I can give you examples and I can show you court papers. Of course, I'm not going to do that, but if I could to the legislators. But when it comes time to really support, please help. Please help. Tell your friends. It doesn't take a whole lot to help that way. And the state thanks you. We thank you. Anybody who gets acupuncture thanks you. So, thank you.